This is the Party Political Playlist.
Okay then, so it's time to welcome our guest for the next hour. Welcome, Philip. How are you doing?
Pleased to meet you.
Okay, so I suppose to start off with, I'll just kind of let you introduce yourself and who you are and what you stand for.
Well, I'm Philip Glover. I'm the UK Independence Party candidate for Bournemouth West. It's my first time as a general election candidate. I've stood locally in Christchurch for 2 local council elections in 2007 and 2009. So this is a big first time for me.
That's interesting. So do you live in Bournemouth?
No, I was born in Bournemouth, so I am local. I have also had a job in Bournemouth for nearly 15 years previously, and I live in Christchurch.
All right, but you've got
obviously links because I was born here. Yes.
Yeah.
So what sort of inspired you to get into politics, especially like in the last couple of years?
Well, I used to belong to the Conservative Party, and I was never an activist with them because I was always a Eurosceptic, and they would never change their pro-European stance. And I'd flirted with UKIP for years. There was a by-election in Christchurch in 1993 when, unfortunately, the Conservative MP there died. And Dr. Alan Sked, who was an academic with the London School of Economics, was standing as the UKIP candidate. He was one of the founders of UKIP. And he was standing in Christchurch in the by-election then. And I actually voted for him. And we ended up getting a Lib Dem MP temporarily. But after that, I'd always voted for the Conservatives in the general elections, but I had always voted for UKIP in the European elections from the time they started presenting themselves for the European Parliament. So I'd always voted UKIP in those elections and Conservative in other elections.
Right. This is interesting.
Yeah.
But obviously, at that point, after the last election, and I wasn't very keen on the current leader of the Conservative Party because I think he's a Europhile, I decided there's something to do about it, so I joined UKIP and became an activist with them, something I'd always wanted to do, but I've always refrained from being active in the Conservative Party just because of their Europhile stance.
Yeah. We talked in the break a bit earlier about you said you were a student quite fairly recently at Southampton.
Yes.
So how did you come about deciding to go back into education?
Well, I'd wanted to go back into education probably from roughly my mid-20s, but I'd never been able to afford to do it. And I'd had numerous jobs, and one job in particular, one employer for nearly 15 years, and I was always put down and had sort of rotten jobs and hated it, never felt intellectually challenged, bored to death, tried writing a novel, didn't get that published, and I thought, this is me, I've got to do this to help my chances for the future and for personal fulfilment. So I went and did an access course after a short tried a media course at Bournemouth and Paul College. I then did this access course for a year and then went into higher education at Southampton, and it was the best move I've ever made, and I found it a thoroughly stimulating and enjoyable experience.
I think it's interesting because speaking to the other candidates, I think obviously having gone back as a mature student, I think you're probably the person who was most recently kind of relating to student issues.
Yes.
Through obviously being in education and stuff. So I suppose an obvious question would be, what are your views on the tuition fee?
I think it's disgusting. I think it should never have happened, and I think there should be full student grants for students, both having their fees paid and also maintenance grants for them to have a decent income without having to have a student loan. When I did it 10 years ago, it was a mixture. We had our fees paid, and also there was a small amount of loan element and a small amount of maintenance grant element to have. So I think it was about $1,800 a year, roughly, I had as maintenance grant, and the rest I had to borrow. And it took quite a while to pay it back.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I can fully sympathise with anybody in the system now, and in far more debt than I got into.
Okay, that's the Monkeys, and you're listening to Nerve Radio and the Party Political Playlist, and we're joined by Philip Glover.
Live from Talbot Campus, this is Nerve Radio.
So that was Daydream Believer. So Philip, what do you believe in then? What do you think? How do you think the UK Independence Party could where could they take Britain, I suppose?
Well, for our key cornerstone policy is actually leaving the EU, and we're currently contributing £45 million a day to it, which is going straight out of the British economy. We get very little net back from that, so that would obviously help economically, and also they are overruling us with all sorts of directives from Brussels. All these directives are made obviously by unelected bureaucrats and also the EU commissioners that are also unelected. The European Parliament itself has very little say. They only rubber stamp a few things, and in fact our Parliament in Westminster only rubber stamps a lot of directives that come from the EU, so we're actually losing our sovereignty and our power in this country. So my thing is to get us out of the EU.
If we were to pull out of the EU, would that tie in with the kind of immigration? Because it's being part of the EU, we kind of have an open doors.
We do
policy,
with the EU, yes.
Within countries that are within Europe.
Well, that's it. Yes, that's what happens. Well, what it is, all the three other parties are making big noises about controlling immigration from outside the EU, and that isn't the problem. The problem is immigration from within the EU, and it's all to do with space, not race, of course, where anybody who is an EU citizen can come and live and work here. And of course we're only a small island, so of course you're getting a lot of people who want to come over here for economic reasons, and it's just overcrowding us. So really we need to control immigration from continental Europe for that reason.
It's interesting because it's an issue that came up earlier as well. One of the suggestions, I can't remember the exact. Can you remember the exact figure? It was basically suggesting that the Bournemouth actually is one of the places that actually managed to take a lot from the sort of immigration because of the language schools we have.
Well, they're only temporary, don't forget, and they're all welcome here to come as students, obviously. I think they ought to make it easier for them, because there's some stupid tests that the current government have now where they've got to speak a certain amount of English to be able to be a student here. Well, if they want to come to this country to learn English, they've got to be able to speak English first, which is ridiculous. I mean, you're obviously coming to this country to learn English, so why should you be able to speak English before you come here to learn it?
Yeah. Sure. It seems somewhat.
And we need their business here. I mean, I think the language schools, I remember 40 years ago when the language schools were here, and in my teenage years I can remember them clearly, and foreign students then. And I mean, they are the part of the lifeblood of this community, because people obviously families earn extra money by having students in their homes, and obviously there's all the people employed to do with the language school, so obviously it's a key thing to have them here, and they're most welcome as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting. The area of Bournemouth West has been a conservative area for a long time now, isn't it?
Yes.
How have you seen it change over the years? I mean, in terms of the new massive booming student population now, and in Winton and things like that, how have you seen Bournemouth West change, I suppose?
Well, obviously there's a lot of students in the area because it's near the university, and as I say, I've mentioned foreign students. Obviously foreign students are important, but also students from this country are most welcome as well. And I think there is a lot of suitable accommodation for them. I know there are purpose-built halls as well that have been built near the Lansdowne. I've seen that. That's quite a large building, isn't it?
Yeah, and plus the three other halls, Purbeck and Cranbourne. Yeah, no, there's definitely Lansdowne in particular is probably one of the heavily sort of student-based areas.
Yeah, that was an empty site for many years because I used to work near there, and I know what it was like. It was just derelict land where they pulled all the houses down and just left it for years. It's good to see it there now.
Okay, so we're going to try a little feature now we've been running over the last couple of shows. We did it a few people. Pretty much it's called Pop Star or Politician, and how this works is that I quote a bit of dialogue, and it's either I ask you either if a pop star said it or a politician said it, as in a pop star in a song.
I see.
So
you want to know whether I know a well-known quote?
This is a feature that we do on our regular show, and I am notoriously bad at it. We usually do it with pop or poetry, but we've adapted it slightly. So and these will probably be really obvious. So far, Liam has lost with everyone. He's
Okay. I'll try and say this so it doesn't sound like a song or a politician. Okay. If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in